Two officers knocked at midnight. Missing person report. Are you Tessa Blake? I am. And I'm not missing. I just blocked my family. I turned 30 last week. Threw myself a party. No one showed. 7 days later, Mom texted. Dad's 50th at Lakeside Resort. 1-800 per person. Venmo me. I sent $1. Congratulations. Then changed the locks. They tried my accounts. Then called the police. I'm Tessa. 30. Former family bank. Newly unavailable. If you've survived this kind of love, tell me where you're watching. And listen. Because the night I chose myself, they chose war. I didn't become the bank overnight. It grew from favors into rules. Childhood taught me love had receipts. Good grades bought silence, not pride. Don't be difficult, Mom said. Be useful. Dad preached sacrifice like scripture. Family first, money now. Sarah learned to ask pretty. I learned to pay quickly. 19, I co-signed a refinance. Just paperwork, Dad said. I signed where he tapped. 22, I wired tuition. Only this once, she promised. 24, Dad's car died. I bought the bridge car. The bridge never ended. Question the pattern, get punished. Ungrateful, Mom said. They kept score. Moved goalposts. Called me dramatic. I chased worth with payments. Affection felt conditional. 30 neared like a deadline. I saved between rescues. They called it hoarding. Why save so much? Your sister has real costs. Her ring, her remodel. Her second honeymoon, investment. The joint account stayed open. Convenience, I told myself. Leash it was. When I delayed, messages piled. This is urgent. Don't make us beg. Dad's closer never changed. You owe us your life. Turning 30, I chose different. A tiny lounge. A cake with my name. I sent time and a map. 7 slid past. 9 swallowed my voice. No call, no sorry. Just the bartender's mercy pour. A week later, Mom's blast landed. Dad's 50th, Lakeside Resort. 1-800 per person, Venmo me. Not a word about my birthday. Just a bill and a deadline. Something clicked shut. Not rage. A lock. I sent $1. Congratulations. Changed my locks. Blocked every number. 2 days later, the joint account pinged. Security alert, my bank sirened. I moved the money. Silence arrived like weather. Then blue and red lights. Missing person? The officer asked. Not missing. Finally found. When I said no, they chose war. After the police left, quiet settled like a foreign language. No buzzing phone. No knocks. No sudden urgent texts. At first, it felt like victory. Then it felt like withdrawal. I'd been addicted to chaos, trained to answer. Now silence pressed against my chest. I filled the hours with work. Early mornings, late nights. Spreadsheets steadier than family. Emails kinder than blood. At the office, no one knew. I smiled on cue, delivered reports. But the moment I shut my door, my hands shook with leftover adrenaline. I replayed their voices. Ungrateful. Selfish, dramatic. The family chorus etched in my spine. Therapy became oxygen. Dr. Keller's office a refuge. Boundaries aren't walls, she reminded me. They're doors you control. Still, I doubted. Had I gone too far? The missing person stunt rattled me. Who calls police just because you blocked them? I remembered birthdays past. The half smile when I handed over checks. The way my mother pocketed envelopes. Before even hugging me, love had been measured in wire transfers. Now that love was gone. So who was I without it? I tried new routines, the gym after work. Cooking instead of takeout. Coffee with coworkers who asked nothing in return. One night, Robert from accounting invited me bowling. I almost said no, old habits rising. What if family needed me? Then I laughed. They weren't calling anymore. The lane lights glowed neon. Pins crashed like applause. For the first time in years, joy wasn't followed by guilt. Still, I carried scars. Every purchase triggered a memory. Would Dad call this wasteful? Would Mom say Sarah deserved more? I forced myself to buy a new jacket. Soft wool, navy blue. It fit like armor. At work, promotions circled. Tim, you've carried this place, my boss said. We want you leading the new project. Respect without invoices attached. Nights alone were hardest. I stared at locked doors, waiting for headlights in the driveway. But they never came. Instead, emails from my lawyer arrived. They tried to reopen the joint account. Blocked. They attempted a mortgage refinance. Denied. Each attempt another reminder. They weren't done, but neither was I. I kept a folder on my desk. Statements, screenshots, proof. Every dollar I covered. Every plea archived. It wasn't obsession, it was preparation, because I knew silence was temporary. They would return. And this time, I wouldn't flinch. Quiet doesn't mean peace. It means gathering strength. The knock came 3 weeks later. Sharp, relentless. Not a neighbor. Not delivery. Through the peephole, my sister, Sarah. Mascara streaked, eyes swollen. Behind her, Dad's car idled. I hesitated, then opened the door an inch. "You can't just vanish," she snapped. "You're tearing this family apart." I didn't vanish, I blocked abuse. Her lip trembled. "Dad's in trouble. We need you." Trouble? My stomach tightened. Fraud. Tax evasion. The words spilled fast, rehearsed. "Federal charges, Tim. He could lose everything." She gripped my arm. "You have connections. Judges, lawyers, help us." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "My connections are my coworkers, not miracle workers." Her desperation deepened. "Think about Dad, about Mom. This family needs unity." Unity. The word cut deep. Where was unity at my birthday? Where was love when I begged for respect? "You ignored me," I whispered. "You called me selfish for leaving. And now I'm supposed to save him?" Tears welled. "You don't understand. Without you, he'll collapse. We'll lose the house. The house. The mortgage I co-signed. The one they tried to refinance behind my back. Now it was leverage." Dad stepped forward then. His voice still carried weight. "Tim, son, do the right thing." The word son hit like poison. Only used when they wanted something. Never when I needed love. "Do the right thing?" I held his gaze. "You forged me into a wallet. Now you want forgiveness on credit?" His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting. Family sacrifices for each other. Sacrifice." That twisted scripture again. Their code for exploitation. "You sacrificed me for Sarah's wedding. For Ethan's tuition. For every whim and whimsy. I bled so you could shine." Sarah sobbed louder. "Please, Tim, think of the boys. Your nephews adore you." My chest cracked. Children were innocent. But innocence didn't erase betrayal. "No," I said. "Not this time. Not ever again." Silence. Cold. Heavy. Dad's eyes hardened. "You'll regret this." "Blood is blood." I stepped back, door half shut. "No, blood is not bondage." "Not anymore." I closed it, firm. Their muffled voices lingered outside. Threats, pleas, all tangled. Inside, I leaned against the door, heart pounding, hands trembling, but my choice steady. The twist wasn't their fraud. It wasn't their desperation. It was me, finally refusing the role they wrote. Sometimes the biggest betrayal is realizing family sees you as currency. The knock at my door was a drumbeat of fury. Through the peephole, I saw them, my parents, my sister, their faces hard. I braced myself, breath tight, pulse hammering. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Go home." Mom's voice was sharp, slicing through the night air. "Oh, now you're hiding? Your father is beside himself. He thinks you've lost your mind." "I'm perfectly sane," I replied, my voice cold. "I just finally decided I'm done being your bank account." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't turn your back on family." "I didn't turn my back. I just stopped paying for your lifestyle." Her face twisted. "So this is about money, after everything we've done for you?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Everything you've done? You mean the guilt trips? The constant demands? The silence when I needed you most?" Dad stepped forward, his voice heavy with fake disappointment. "Tim, what are you doing? Why are you acting like this?" "I'm acting like someone who's tired of being used." "You're making this all about money," he shouted, losing his calm facade. "Family is about sacrifice, about support." I shook my head slowly, eyes burning. "No, family is about respect, and you never gave me any." Mom laughed, the sound bitter, almost mocking. "We've done everything for you, and this is how you repay us? Everything for me? Like draining my accounts for your vacations? For Sarah's wedding? For Ethan's college? But when it came to me, even my birthday, you didn't care." Dad scoffed. "You're 30. Grow up." "Yeah," I snapped, my voice rising. "Grow up and keep paying your bills. That's all I ever was. Your safety net." "You owe us," Dad barked, stepping closer. "We raised you, fed you, gave you an education. I owe you nothing. Not a cent, not a minute, nothing. You're destroying this family." Mom's voice cracked with fury. "No, I'm just not letting you destroy me." Sarah stormed forward, her voice shrill with rage. "Are you happy now? Mom's been crying all morning. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof." "Spare me the drama," I shot back. "This is what you all do. You play victims when the money stops." "You're so selfish," Sarah spat. "You think you're better than us." "No, I just finally realized I deserve better than this." Her scream cut the air. Fine, go be alone then, let him rot. They turned toward their cars, but Mom looked back one last time. Her face was fury and venom. You'll come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. I smiled coldly. Don't hold your breath. The tires screeched, leaving silence sharp as broken glass. Inside, I leaned against the door, heart still pounding. For the first time, I felt untouchable, but they weren't finished with me yet. The courthouse steps felt endless beneath my feet. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing like interrogation lights. I kept walking. Their questions weren't my story. It was mine. My freedom. My truth. Robert waited by his car, steady as always. He asked just one thing. Are you all right? I laughed softly, breath shaky. I don't know, but I'm free. Weeks unraveled piece by piece. Accounts frozen, house secured, debts tied to their own names. Collectors stopped knocking. Silence settled like a fragile gift. Nights were hardest. Guilt crept in like smoke. Blood is blood, his voice echoed. Had I betrayed him? Or had he betrayed me long ago? The scars on my chest told the answer. Robert visited often, tea in hand, voice calm. You're not broken, he said. You survived. I reclaimed the kitchen, scrubbing away years of shame. Opened curtains wide, letting sunlight flood a room once poisoned. Then a call from Miss Grant, my lawyer. The restitution order is final. He'll repay damages monthly. Irony stung sweet. Piece by piece, he'd repay what he scarred. For so long, I'd been useful, not loved. Now, with bars between us, peace finally belonged to me. Not perfect, not total, but real enough. I'll never forget the father I once believed in. But belief almost destroyed me. Love without respect is a knife, and I refuse to bleed for family again. So I choose boundaries. I choose freedom. I choose myself. That is the legacy I'll carry forward. If you've faced this, you're not alone. Have you ever had to stand up to blood? When that blood tried to drain you dry? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes walking away is the bravest love of all. Because real family isn't about guilt or chains. It's about respect. About seeing each other fully. And if that can't be found in blood, then I will find it in the family I choose.
The fork was still halfway to my mouth when she said it. Give me the money and stop being a leech. It was louder than necessary. Louder than the clinking of glasses, louder than the shallow laughter that had filled the room just moments earlier. The kind of loud that was meant to cut, to shame, to make sure everyone heard. My brother froze mid-chew. My cousin stopped pouring wine. Even the youngest niece looked up from her phone. All eyes were on me. I set my fork down gently. My napkin still folded untouched on my lap. Then I did something no one expected. I laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a hysterical one. It was low, steady. Almost tired. Across the table, Loretta's face pinched with confusion. Then irritation. She leaned forward like she hadn't just detonated a bomb. I mean it, Rhea, she snapped. It's about time you grew up and stopped depending on other people. Your father would be ashamed if he saw what you've become. That part made me pause. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I stood up, smoothing my dress at the hip. The room was silent. No, I said calmly, looking straight at her. He'd be ashamed of you. She blinked. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick white envelope I'd been carrying for months. I walked it to the center of the table and placed it between the butter dish and the salt shaker. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling now. A reminder, I said, that you've been living in a house you don't own, paid for by the daughter you just called a leech. And then, with all the grace she never gave me, I turned to leave. After my father died, the first thing my mother said wasn't about the funeral or the house or even her grief. It was, what am I supposed to do now? I knew what she meant, not emotionally, financially. Within 2 weeks, she'd moved into my guest bedroom with 3 suitcases and a box labeled important papers that was mostly old tax documents and unopened bills. She never asked if she could stay. She just arrived. I paid for everything quietly, the utilities, the groceries, her credit card minimums. I covered the balance when her car needed new tires and again when she overdrew her checking account for the 5th time that year. I even made her cell phone bill part of my autopay just so she wouldn't have to feel the shame of being cut off. Except she never felt shame. Not once. At family gatherings, she'd brag about how she keeps the lights on and how I was lucky she didn't charge rent. When my uncle once joked that I owed her room service, she laughed and said she eats like a queen and I foot the bill. Everyone nodded. Everyone smiled. I said nothing. Letting her have the credit made things easier. It kept the peace. I told myself that was worth something, but I started noticing the quiet ways she rewrote the story. It was no longer that I let her move in, it was that she rescued me, that she was the one carrying the household, that I was a burden she graciously tolerated, and every time I swallowed it, I made it true. I kept the receipts, the bank statements, the transfer logs. I kept them not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew eventually I'd need to remember I wasn't crazy. And the moment I needed them finally came on the night she called me a leech. The signs were always there. Small, sharp things I convinced myself weren't worth bleeding over. She called me selfish the first time I said no to a vacation she wanted, one I would have had to finance. "You're lucky I don't charge you for all the things I've done," she added, tossing the catalog onto the kitchen counter like a challenge. When I wore a blazer from Goodwill to a cousin's wedding, she pulled me aside before we walked in and hissed, "Don't embarrass me tonight." I smiled and adjusted the sleeves, knowing the tags were cut off, but the judgment wasn't. She'd whisper to relatives when she thought I was out of earshot. "She means well, but honestly, she wouldn't survive without me." Then she'd say it louder, just enough for me to hear. "Some people just never grow up." At first, I laughed it off. Then I minimized. Then I swallowed. A friend of mine once came over while Mom was mid-rant about how I'd forgotten her medication refill, even though it was sitting in a paper bag on the counter. After she left the room, my friend asked, "Why do you let her speak to you like that?" I didn't answer. I didn't have one. Because I loved her, because she was my mother, because no one ever taught me that love doesn't mean allowing slow erosion. I stopped inviting people over after that. It was easier to pretend I was choosing solitude than to explain I was enduring something. But love, real love, doesn't make you smaller to fit someone else's pride. And somewhere deep down, I knew she didn't want a daughter. She wanted a dependent with no memory of where the help came from. It was a Tuesday morning when I signed the papers. The realtor handed me the folder with a polite smile, oblivious to the quiet war it represented. I nodded, thanked her, and slid the documents into my bag. The ink wasn't even dry, but the decision had been made long before. I'd opened a holding company 6 months prior, nothing flashy, just enough of a buffer to keep Loretta from snooping. She didn't know how to read property records, but she asked questions when names were too familiar. So the company bore the name of a long-gone great-aunt and a string of initials that meant nothing to her. She believed with certainty that the house we lived in was leased from a family friend who'd been generous to Rhea. She liked to tell people she negotiated the rent, that her social graces kept us sheltered, that the trust fund my father left me was what paid the bills. There was no trust fund. There was just me. And now there was a deed with my name on it. Mine, not hers. Not ours. Not temporary. I bought the house because I was tired of being reminded it wasn't mine. Every time she told someone I was lucky she'd helped me land on my feet. Every time she slammed a door and muttered, "My roof, my rules." Every time she threatened to leave and said, "You wouldn't last a week without me." I bought the house because I knew someday I would need proof. The mortgage came out of an account she didn't know about. The taxes, the insurance, all routed through the company. I kept the original documents in a safe deposit box. I carried copies in my bag. I didn't plan on using them that night at dinner, but I never left home without them. I told her I'd been let go from my consulting firm. No drama, just budget cuts, I said. Downsizing. It happens. She didn't ask for details. She only asked, "So, what does that mean for me?" I shrugged. "We'll have to be more careful for a while." That week, I started swapping brands. No more fancy coffee, no more fresh-cut flowers in the foyer. The Amazon deliveries slowed to a halt. I wore the same 3 sweaters on rotation thrift store finds, soft and faded. I stopped getting my hair done. Let the grays peek through. Loretta noticed. She started sighing louder when the Wi-Fi cut out. Made backhanded comments about what this place used to be like before it got so sad. She canceled her yoga membership on my card and told her friends I was in a rough patch. What she didn't know was that business had never been better. My firm had quietly expanded. I had investments earning more each month than most people made in a year. but I wanted to see what she'd do when there was nothing left to extract. It didn't take long. She began calling me useless when she thought I couldn't hear. Told my cousin at a birthday party that I was draining her spirit. I heard her on the phone with an aunt one night. She sits around all day pretending to be busy. It's pathetic. I was folding laundry at the time, clothes I'd bought with my own money for both of us. That night, I took the wine out of the shared fridge and moved it to a small cooler in my closet. I wanted to see what she'd say when I stopped pouring into her cup. Turns out she started biting the hand that had been feeding her all along. The invitation came on a Monday. Loretta told me we'd be hosting dinner for the family that Friday. Nothing fancy, she said, just a little get-together. It's been too long. I didn't ask why she suddenly wanted to play hostess. I already knew. By Friday evening, the table was dressed like a showroom, linen napkins, crystal glasses, candles that hadn't been lit in years. Loretta wore one of her expensive blouses, the kind she said she only saved for when she needed to be seen. I made the garlic bread. She added too much salt to the roast. We didn't speak much in the kitchen. Family arrived in waves. My cousin Jonah with his wife. Aunt Clara with her usual too loud laugh. My brother Jackson, who hadn't visited in months, brought a bottle of wine that Loretta sniffed at before saying, "Thank you." We all sat, passed dishes, exchanged pleasantries. For a while, it was civil, almost warm. Loretta floated from end to end of the table, smiling too wide, laughing too loudly. Then she stood up and tapped her glass. "I just want to say something," she said, her voice sharp beneath the sugar. "This woman," she pointed toward me, "has been living off me for far too long." Silence. I raised her. I gave her everything, and now she can't even hold down a job. She hides behind her little laptop all day and expects me to cover the bills, to keep the lights on, to clean up her messes. No one moved. No one interrupted. "She owes me," Loretta hissed, voice rising. "And I'm sick of it." Her hand slammed the table. "Give me the money and stop being a leech." The words cracked across the room. My hand tightened around my napkin. I looked around at their faces, confused, embarrassed, entertained. And I knew with absolute certainty that this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I laughed. It came out sharp and sudden, like a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. I laughed because it was absurd, because it was pathetic, because it was over. Loretta's eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" I stood, pulled the envelope from my bag, the one I'd carried for months, the one with copies of the deed, mortgage payments, bank transfers. I laid it gently in front of her plate, right beside the mashed potatoes. "You want money?" I asked, calm now. "You've already had hundreds of thousands. You just never noticed." I looked around the table. Let's clear a few things up. Everyone was still. Forks, suspended wine glasses, forgotten midair. "I'm not unemployed. I own a consulting firm that grossed nearly $1.8 million last year. I downsized on purpose. I dressed like this on purpose." I let her think I was struggling to see what she'd do. Loretta looked like she might choke on her own breath. "I own this house," I continued. "Bought it 2 years ago through a holding company. Every inch, every wall, every dish in that cupboard mine." I met her eyes. "And since you've made it clear I'm nothing more than a leech to you, I think it's time we end this arrangement." She opened the envelope with shaking hands. The room was so quiet I could hear the paper rip. "Those are your 30-day eviction papers," I said, "already notarized." I turned to the rest of the table. "For those of you wondering what just happened, you've been watching a woman insult her landlord at her own eviction dinner." And with that, I picked up my coat from the back of my chair and walked out, leaving the silence to settle behind me like ash. By morning, the damage had already begun. Loretta moved fast. I imagine she started calling people before the dinner plates were even cleared. By sunrise, my phone buzzed with texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. "What's going on?" "Your mom is saying you snapped. She's devastated, Rhea." I didn't reply. By noon, Aunt Margie left me a voicemail laced with tears and judgment. "I don't know what's gotten into you. Kicking your own mother out of her home. You need help." By afternoon, my cousin Leah had reposted a vague status on Facebook. "Sometimes the people you raise turn out to be monsters. Prayers for strength." I scrolled past it. She told them I was unstable, that I had fabricated the deed, that I'd manipulated her for years and waited until she was vulnerable to strike. She claimed I threw her out with no notice, no reason, no mercy. She was rewriting history before the ink had even dried. I could have countered it all, sent PDFs of legal documents, proof of payments, time-stamped emails. I could have posted a public statement named names, laid it bare. But I didn't. Instead, I sat by my window with a cup of coffee and watched the trees bend in the early autumn wind. I thought about how much time I'd spent trying to be seen as good, respectful, kind, and how none of it had protected me. Let them talk. Let them decide who they think I am, based on a woman who never once thanked me for the roof over her head. Let the story spread like a spark in dry grass. Because I knew something Loretta didn't. Fires built on lies always burn themselves out when there's no fuel left to feed them. And I had finally stopped supplying the oxygen. Jackson called the next evening. I stared at his name flashing on the screen for 3 full rings before answering. We hadn't spoken outside of holidays in over a year. He didn't waste time. "I heard what happened," he said. "She's saying you've lost it, that you're dangerous." I waited for the accusation, for him to pick a side. "She did the same thing to me," he said instead. 2 years ago when I stopped sending money. I closed my eyes. She told everyone I was cutting her off out of spite, that I was letting her drown. Never mentioned the tuition I paid for Mia or the medical bills I covered after her surgery. She just flipped the story. I leaned against the wall, letting his voice fill the quiet. I didn't say anything back then. I didn't want the drama. But now, if you need me to confirm anything, to talk to anyone, I will. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was heavy. Long overdue. "Thanks," I said. "I might take you up on that." "I should have stepped in sooner," he added. "I saw the way she talked to you. But I figured—" "You had it handled?" "I did," I said, "until I didn't." He sighed. "Well, I'm here now. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was holding the whole story alone." After we hung up, I sat in the dark a while longer, letting the quiet settle. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the legal documents again this time, not with hesitation, but with purpose. She filed the claim 2 weeks later. Elder abuse, the paperwork said. Unlawful eviction. Coercion. I read it twice slowly, letting each word sit like a stone on my chest. Then I forwarded it to my attorney. "She's going to lose," he told me. "This is smoke, not fire." Still, the hearing was scheduled. I showed up with a file box of proof bank statements, signed agreements, the deed, tax records, even the lease Loretta had signed years ago that acknowledged she was living in my home as a guest. She arrived in Pearl's tears already shining, told the judge I manipulated her, said she'd been emotionally mistreated, said she was thrown out with nothing but a suitcase. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Then I stood and handed the judge a binder. Organized, labeled, time-stamped. There were copies of every payment I made on her behalf. Utility bills in my name, her car repairs, her medication, screenshots of her texts asking for money, voicemails where she thanked me when she still remembered how. I included the email she once sent to my accountant asking for another wire transfer since Raya owes me for raising her. The judge flipped through each page slower than I wanted, steadier than she expected. Then he looked at her. "You've provided no evidence of financial abuse," he said. "No evidence of coercion. No proof that your daughter acted unlawfully in removing you from a home that she not only owns, but has paid for, documented in detail." She started to object. He raised a hand. "This case is dismissed. Immediately." Loretta's mouth opened, but no sound came. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply turned to my attorney. "Let's proceed with the restraining order." He nodded. And in that moment, without shouting, without fury, I watched justice arrive, quiet, undeniable, final. The new place wasn't bigger, it wasn't flashier, but it was mine in a way the last one never truly had been. No lingering footsteps down the hallway that didn't belong to me. No second toothbrush on the bathroom counter. No passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge. Just quiet. Just space. I didn't decorate all at once. I unpacked slowly, choosing where things went, not based on obligation or shared preference, but instinct. I threw out the old towels, bought new ones in the exact shade of blue I liked. The first night I slept with the window open and the door unlocked, not because I forgot, but because I wasn't afraid. There was no triumph in it, no victory parade, just the quiet satisfaction of air that didn't feel borrowed. A few days in, I saw one of my neighbors watering her plants out front. She looked up, smiled, and waved. I hesitated, then raised my hand and waved back. It was small, almost nothing, but it felt like a start. I no longer had to carry proof of who I was in a manila folder, no longer had to defend or justify or shrink to make someone else feel taller. The silence in my home was no longer tense. It was earned. And in that stillness, for the first time in years, I began to hear my own voice again, clear, steady, and entirely my own. The building was modest. A converted library just off Main Street with creaky floors and windows that let in too much light. But the chairs were full and the coffee was strong and no one looked at me like I owed them something. I walked to the front of the room, notes in hand. People glanced up, some curious, others cautious. I recognized the expression. I'd worn it myself once. The sign behind me read, "The Calder Foundation, for those who chose peace over pleasing." It had started as a whisper of an idea scribbled in the margins of court filings and grocery lists. A place for people like me, people who loved deeply and lost quietly, people told they were ungrateful for choosing distance, selfish for choosing peace. I took a breath, set my notes down, let the silence hold a little longer than felt comfortable. Then I said, "I'm not here to be liked anymore. I'm here to be whole." No one clapped, no one interrupted, they just nodded. One by one they began to speak. Stories different from mine, but lined with the same quiet ache, the same relief, the same slow rebuilding. And as I listened, I realized something I hadn't come to teach. I'd come to witness. There were so many versions of healing. Mine wasn't louder than theirs, just newer, still forming. And in that shared room, I felt it, something settling, something lifting, something beginning. The key turned with a clean click. I stepped inside and felt the stillness breathe around me, unfurnished walls, scuffed hardwood floors, and sunlight stretching long across the hallway. It smelled faintly of dust and pine cleaner, not luxury, not permanence. But it was mine. I had signed the lease 3 days ago, paid the deposit in full, and hauled everything I owned in 2 carloads. A futon, a small dining table, 4 mismatched plates, and a thrifted lamp with a crooked shade. No one helped me move. I hadn't asked. I was setting down a box of utensils when I heard the engines. 2 vehicles pulled up. First, my dad's black SUV. Then Callie's minivan, sagging slightly under the weight of car seats and plastic bags. Doors opened like an unfolding threat. My father, first arms crossed Callie behind him, wrangling her twins, and Jeremy shuffling out last with a diaper bag. No one had texted. No one had called. But they were here on my sidewalk like this was a planned delivery. I didn't open the door right away. When I finally did, my dad didn't say hello. He looked behind me, past me, into the apartment like appraising a hotel suite. His brow creased. "Where are we supposed to sleep?" Callie hovered behind him, biting her lip. One of the kids asked if there was a bunk bed. I kept my hand on the knob. "You're not." He squinted. "What, you're not sleeping here?" I said clearly. "This place isn't for you." My dad's expression didn't change. It hardened. "You're saying we came all this way for nothing. I didn't ask you to come." Callie stepped forward, voice brittle. "The kids were so excited, Sarah. They picked out spots for their sleeping bags." "I understand," I said. "But this is my apartment. It's not a family space. It never was." There was a pause, long, heavy, the kind that used to scare me into backing down, but not this time. I stood in that doorway, feet planted. And then, without raising my voice, I added, "You don't live here. You don't sleep here. You don't decide this time." I closed the door, not with force, but finality. Behind it, for the first time in years, I exhaled without guilt. I used to think it was normal to pack up your things every time company came. In our old house in Spokane, my room doubled as a guest space storage overflow, or on some weekends, a quiet room for Callie's babies to nap. I learned early how to make myself small, how to roll up my mattress pad and tuck it behind the laundry shelf without making noise. I slept on the living room carpet more times than I can count. My dad said it built character. My mom said I was the easy one. Callie was never asked to move. She was younger by 3 years, but you wouldn't have known it by the way our parents orbited her. Every need was urgent. Every setback was a crisis. If she cried, the whole house hushed. If I succeeded, the house kept chewing. I remember once 7th grade, I won 2nd place in the regional science fair. I came home carrying a certificate and a $75 bookstore gift card. My dad barely looked up from his football game. Callie had a sore throat that day, and the mood in the house was delicate. Later that night, I overheard Mom whispering Callie's just more sensitive. Sarah doesn't need all that fuss, so I stopped expecting the fuss. I learned to celebrate alone, quietly, in the back row, with a kind of dignity no one else seemed to recognize. I worked through high school bagging groceries after class, not because I had to, but because I wanted to save for college. I opened a separate account at a credit union and labeled it UO Fund for University of Oregon. Every time I skipped a coffee or took an extra shift, I imagined my future in a city where no one would ask me to give up my bed. When the acceptance letter came, I held it in shaking hands. Interior design, full admission. I told Mom, who was stirring something on the stove, and she said, "Oh, that's cute. But Callie's going through a tough time right now. Can you help her find a daycare this weekend?" I nodded. Of course. 2 months before my move, I called the bank to confirm my account balance. The woman on the line cleared her throat awkwardly and said, "It was withdrawn last week, all of it." Signed by a joint account holder, Marion Alden. The air went out of me. When I asked my mother, she sounded annoyed. Callie's lease fell through. She and the baby had nowhere to go. "You're still going to school, aren't you?" I was. But I took out a loan with interest that same week and never mentioned it again. In their eyes, I had a future. Callie had emergencies, and I was the bridge between them, always bending, always giving, until one day I didn't. College didn't break me, but it tried. I learned how to make 1 pack of ramen last 2 meals, sometimes 3 if I skipped the flavor packet and added hot sauce from the campus cafe. I worked mornings at the library stamping return dates and fixing the broken spine of donated books. At night, I packed floral centerpieces at a shop 2 bus routes away. By the time I crawled into bed, it wasn't sleep I craved, it was stillness. The kind where no one asked me for anything. My professor said I was precise, disciplined, a natural. I said thank you and smiled, then ran spreadsheets until midnight trying to stretch $32 across 5 days. Callie, meanwhile, was back in Spokane posting pictures of latte art and baby milestones. She dropped out of her nursing program midway through her 2nd year, too much stress, she said, but still managed to land a part-time admin job at a clinic through one of Dad's old contacts. For her 24th birthday, my parents surprised her with a used Toyota Corolla. "It's time she had some independence," Mom said. I got the news via group text. The same week, I walked 4 miles in the rain to avoid another overdraft fee on my transit card. I didn't complain, not out loud. I told myself it was fine, temporary, character building. But then came the message that knocked something loose. I had just submitted my final project for Studio Design 3. It was 2 in the morning, and I was sitting on the back stairwell outside my apartment, cooling off from a panic attack I hadn't named yet. My phone buzzed. "Mom. We covered Callie's daycare this month. Used that savings account you never touch. Figured you wouldn't mind. There was no question, no heads up, just assumption. My emergency fund, built from canceled haircuts, skipped lunches, and missed outings, gone. Just like that." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. No tears. Just a slow, suffocating pressure pressing down on my chest like a weight I wasn't allowed to acknowledge. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Instead, I curled up on the stairwell with my knees pulled to my chest and let the quiet swallow me. They didn't hate me. That was the hardest part. They loved me, I think, in the way people love tools. Useful, durable, built to carry weight. And I had carried it. For years, I convinced myself it was noble, that I was the strong one, that maybe love looked different when it was quiet, when it didn't come with praise or protection. But in that stairwell beneath the buzzing hallway light, I finally let myself wonder, what if it was never love at all? That night, I started looking for internships in other cities. I toured 23 units before I said yes. Some were too dim, too cold, too much carpet. Others came with peeling cabinets or landlords who smiled too quickly. But then I stepped into the one-bedroom on Lincoln Street, a second-floor walk-up with sunlight pooling on the floor like it had been waiting for me. It smelled faintly of citrus and old paint. The windows opened easily. There was a heater that ticked when it warmed up and a creaky floorboard just past the kitchen archway. It wasn't beautiful, but it felt honest. I didn't need a dream home. I needed enough space to exhale. The lease was straightforward. I read every line twice, signed in blue ink, and transferred the deposit from my home fund spreadsheet with a steady hand. When the keys dropped into my palm, it felt like being handed permission. I moved in slowly. No trucks, no help. Just a rolling suitcase and 2 borrowed plastic bins. I brought in my books first, then my plants, then a folding chair. I placed everything with intention, even the silence. For 2 weeks, I told no one. I walked to work, brewed coffee in the mornings, watched light shift across the walls in the evening. I wasn't hiding, it just hadn't occurred to me that I needed to explain. Then, one Saturday, I sent a text to the family group chat. "Saturday at 3, come see my place." The response was immediate. "Callie, are we bringing an air mattress or are there enough beds, Mom? How exciting, we'll grab lunch on the way. The kids are thrilled. Dad, send the lease papers. I want to take a look before we move forward." I stared at the screen. I hadn't said we. I hadn't offered anything beyond a glimpse, but their assumptions slid in easily like a hand into an old glove. Of course I'd made space for them. Of course they'd already packed. I closed my phone and placed it upside down on the counter. That evening, I opened every window and let the air in until the whole apartment smelled like rosemary and something sharp, something clean. I stood in the center of the room, barefoot, listening to the walls breathe. If I'd said nothing, they might have stayed away. If I'd said more, they might have asked permission. But silence, I was learning, didn't protect you. Sometimes it just gave other people more room to assume you'd never say no. I poured a glass of water, sat in my folding chair, and waited for the knock I already knew was coming. They arrived at 2:04 p.m., just late enough to feel intentional. Dad walked in first without knocking, brushing past me like he was inspecting a property he'd already closed on. Callie followed, balancing a diaper bag and a tote filled with coloring books. Jeremy lingered outside, and the kids poured in like it was their new playground, jumping from one corner of the living room to the other, yelling about who got the window side. I said nothing, just moved to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. Callie set a manila folder on the table. "We wanted to show you this in person," she said. Her voice was light, practiced. "It'll make more sense once you see it." Dad opened the folder with a tap of his knuckle like it was a poker hand he knew would win. Inside, mortgage documents, property listings, a color printout of a large house with a wraparound porch and 5 bedrooms. One of the pages had notes scribbled on it. Callie and Jeremy Master Suite. Kids upstairs. Sarah office, our guest room. This is the one Dad said. North Ridge. New development. Just minutes from Callie's work and a great school district. "I didn't agree to this," I said quietly. He looked up, eyes sharp. "You didn't say no." "I didn't say yes either." Callie leaned in. "We already put down $2,000 to hold it. Through Mom's account. The bank just needs a primary borrower. Your credit's the cleanest." I stared at her. "So you planned a family mortgage using my name?" "I'll contribute what I can," she offered too quickly. "Maybe $300-400 a month. Once Jeremy picks up more shifts." Dad crossed his arms. "You live alone. No dependents. This is a chance to build something together." I didn't raise my voice. "I've been building something. Alone." He slammed his hand on the table. "Where are we supposed to sleep?" Then I stood up. "You don't. Not here." The room stilled. Even the children quieted. I gathered the folder, closed it, and placed it back in front of them. "If you want the house, buy it yourselves. But not with my name." Callie's face crumpled. Dad turned red. Jeremy finally stepped inside but said nothing. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. Instead, I walked to the door, opened it, and waited. One by one, they filed out. No one said goodbye. The first message came at 1:13 a.m. Callie, you didn't have to embarrass us like that. The kids didn't understand. I didn't respond. By morning, another followed. Dad, you're not family anymore. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've done. That one made me pause, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I looked at the words for a long time, waiting for the familiar ache, the panic. Nothing came. Later that afternoon, my phone lit up with a call from Mom. I let it ring out the first time. She tried again 10 minutes later, then again. On the fourth, I answered. Her voice was trembling the way it always did when she was just upset enough to seem fragile, but not enough to be kind. Sarah, your sister's devastated. Your father's blood pressure is up. Do you know what this is doing to our family? I sat on the floor beside my bookshelf, her voice tinny in my ear. You're tearing us apart over a few pieces of paper. You could have just signed and figured the rest out later. We always figure it out. Not this time, I said. My voice was steady. Calm. She sniffled. I don't know what happened to you. You used to be so thoughtful. I'm still thoughtful, I said. Just not for people who only think of me when they need something. She went quiet. Then the line disconnected. I put the phone face down, stood up, and walked to the hardware store. $38 later, I returned with a new deadbolt and installed it myself. That night, I ordered Thai takeout yellow curry and jasmine rice and ate it sitting cross-legged on my living room floor. I didn't scroll. I didn't reply. Instead, I watched the streetlights blink on outside and felt the weight in my chest shift, not vanish, just rearrange itself into something manageable. Familiar. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't vindicated. But for the first time after one of their storms, I wasn't crumbling. I was intact. And I wasn't going anywhere. It had been nearly 4 months since the folder hit my table and they walked out without looking back. I hadn't blocked anyone. I just stopped reaching out. Then, one evening, just as the light was dipping past the window ledge, my phone buzzed. Callie, I get it now. I'm sorry. No preamble, no questions, just that. A second later, another message arrived, a photo of Mason and Lila sitting cross-legged on a blanket paper crowns on their heads, the baby asleep in Callie's lap. The room around them was cramped and dim, but there was warmth in it. Bare walls, mismatched mugs, a single bulb casting soft light. Real. Unstaged. We're in a rental for now, she wrote. It's small but peaceful. I stared at the photo longer than I expected to. Not because of the kids, but because of her. There was something in her face, exhaustion, yes, but also a kind of clarity, like she'd stopped performing. 2 days later, she stood at my front door with a backpack, a car seat, and a quiet smile. She didn't bring an apology wrapped in ribbon. She didn't expect a tour. She just asked if we could sit. We talked on the porch while the kids chased shadows in the yard. Nothing deep, just how hard it is to buy groceries with rising prices. How daycare wait lists are a joke. She told me she was doing virtual admin work now. I nodded, handed her a glass of water. She didn't fill the silence, and I didn't force it. We weren't rivals anymore. Just two women who had carried too much for too long. She didn't ask me to forget anything. I didn't need her to bleed. When Miss Dorsey from downstairs brought up a tin of cookies, that evening she handed it to me, glanced at Callie through the screen door, and said, "You look lighter with them here." After dinner, the kids fell asleep in a pile of blankets in the corner of the living room. Callie sat beside me with a mug of tea. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The next morning, they were still there. I repainted the living room a soft gray, the kind that shifts with the light. I did it slowly over a weekend, one wall at a time, a podcast humming in the background. When it dried, I stood back and felt something settle, a quiet that didn't need to be earned. The mint on the windowsill had finally taken. I clipped a few sprigs and tucked them into a jar by the sink. Every time I passed, the scent reminded me I had planted something and it hadn't died. My mom came by once in early spring. She stood at the door with a store-bought coffee cake and eyes that didn't carry fire or frost. I'm not here to fix anything she said. I just thought you might let me sit for a while. I did. She complimented the curtains, asked about work. She didn't mention Callie, didn't bring up the house. When she left, she didn't say, "You should visit." She said, "I'm trying." And I believed her. A week later, I hosted dinner on the patio. Callie brought chicken and a bottle of ginger ale. The kids drew chalk rainbows on the concrete. Miss Dorsey arrived with pickled green beans and her usual commentary on city construction. I invited Jules, a co-worker who once gave me a ride home in the rain and never asked why I was crying in the passenger seat. We ate off mismatched plates. Someone spilled juice. Laughter rose not loud, but easy. When the sun dipped, I passed around folded blankets. I didn't hover. I didn't explain anything. I just let it be. That night, as I rinsed dishes and heard Mason giggling from the next room, I caught myself saying it aloud for the first time. I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they're home. And I meant it. Not because they needed me. Not because I was making space. But because I hadn't needed to shrink to let them in.